I'm Rianna.
And I'm Belgrove.
And
we are not theologians. Rianna, I want to ask you a question. Was Jesus a theologian?
Oh. I'm gonna have to say, by my very basic definition, no.
Okay, what's your basic definition?
Somebody who goes to school to study theology.
So Jesus wasn't a theologian because he didn't go to school to study theology.
Correct.
Right. I think that's cool. I love the name of your podcast. And I asked you that question because whether Jesus, we can argue whether Jesus was a theologian or if he wasn't, right? But when you look at Jesus in the New Testament, when he gave his teachings, he never gave his teachings like a theologian. He used stories.
Right.
Right. So when you invited me onto this podcast, I thought about like how I was, what I wanted to share. Right. And in the Bible, there are concepts that we can use to help us practically build our relationship with Christ.
Right.
But I don't know, I've sat in sermons and there have been really good sermons, but I may have forgotten what those topics were, those concepts were, because there were no stories connected to it.
I feel like this is the thing that we lack so much in everything that we do, like teaching, anything that's didactic, anything that's to do with like imparting knowledge, right?
Yeah.
We don't tell stories enough. And I think that the reason, I mean, like you said about Jesus being a theologian in a technical sense, or he didn't teach like a theologian. He told stories because people remember stories. Do you know what I mean? Like the ways, I'm a historian, that's one of my prime concentrations. And the stories of history that I remember the most are the ones that were taught to me through stories. Not through like, this is what happened, this was who was involved. Through people being like, so this guy was like da-da-da-da-da, and this guy, you know? And I feel like that's what we lack sometimes in these religious teaching spaces, is that sense of how can we pull a truth out of this in a way that's going to be memorable to you as a story.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's interesting. So technically the Bible is not a theologian in and of itself, because it takes a bunch of stories and builds a principle.
You're getting really meta here. The Bible isn't a theologian. It's cool. It's a cool concept. I never thought about that.
I just literally thought about it here because when you read the Bible, like people might say the Bible is boring, but there's Latin, Hispanic dramas called novelas. And basically it's just a soap opera, basically. It's so much drama happening. And in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, our family calls the Old Testament una novela. Right? And una novela that you can read, it's PG-13. Because
some of it is R-rated sometimes.
Well, some of it is R-rated, but it's worded in a way where a child can read it and it goes straight over their head. It's just the awesomeness of God. So there's amazing concepts that I think we can use to build our relationship with Christ, but I want to start it off with a story because we're not theologians, right? So in Genesis chapter 42, starting at verse 6, we start off as Joseph as a governor. And we're going to start here and then we're going to back up to see like how he came into this position as a governor. And he was a governor in the land of Egypt. And Joseph is an Israelite, or we can say like a believer in a heathen non-Christian land, right? It's almost like people can say it's challenging to be in power and be a Christian, right? But let's read it here. Genesis chapter 42, verse 6. We're going to go from verse 6 through 8. Go ahead and read that.
Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him.
Okay, so like there's backstory here. Why is he here? Why do they not know him? So a little bit of backstory. If you read a couple verses, beginning of Genesis chapter 42, there's a famine in the whole region, right? And Joseph's brothers have to go to Egypt because God set up Joseph to be a governor to make sure that there would be food during the famine times. And so his brothers are coming and they don't recognize him. And like, why don't they recognize him? Why does he recognize them? And why is he treating them so roughly, right? But before we unpack some of those questions, the question comes like, how did Joseph get to this power, How did he become a ruler and a governor in a heathen land? Chapter 41, verses 39 through 43, highlights how Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph, because of his connection with God, was able to interpret that dream. And that's how he became a leader. But I want to go a little bit deeper, and I want to ask you a question. If you had to describe a good leader, what would some characteristics of a good leader be to you?
I think somebody that recognizes that leadership, to be a leader is to be a servant. So not somebody who lords it over others, as Jesus said to his disciples. I think a good leader is somebody who listens to critique and is able to take responsibility for their actions and for their errors that have caused others difficulty, pain, or problems, and is willing to correct them. I think.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, leadership I think is going to have a lot to do with self-awareness of their own weaknesses and the ways that they need others around them to help support them in correcting those. I think those are some of the main traits that I would say make a good leader.
And in their leadership, they're going to have to filter those counsels and thoughts.
Absolutely, because you can't just take everything everyone says. Like,
exactly.
There are haters. They don't know what you're doing, don't know how
But
to
even
do
from
it.
the haters, you might be able to find some things you can learn.
That's true. That
right?
is true.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is wisdom, like you were saying initially, in knowing how to discern between all the different voices, which advice to take and which to leave. Because leaders have to make tough decisions.
Absolutely.
And so when you're calling the shots, you will call the shots wrong sometimes. You have to be willing to put your hands up and say, like, I got that wrong. My bad. We'll try again, do it better next time.
So it seems like leadership almost takes more humility than somebody who's following in a
Correct.
group. Because you have to, as a leader, you have people in your group that are experts in their field. You have to learn how to lead experts, right? So you have to listen to them, but then also build a respect with your team so that they can follow you as a leader.
Right.
So I bring this up because, and I want to start it here, because Joseph, at this point, according to God, because God wouldn't have put him in this position if he wasn't ready. According to God, Joseph was ready for this leadership position. Because Joseph,
a huge one.
yeah, it's a ginormous one.
Governor of the largest, most powerful nation on earth at this time.
Yeah, think about it this way. Let's just say that you, Rianna, are the president of the United States,
No,
right?
thank you.
Let's just say you are, okay? Okay? And the U.S. is the only one that has stockpiles of food. Like, Canada doesn't even have it in the whole wide world, right? And so you spend your time listening to people ask for food, right? And then you have to coordinate how they get their food. You have to make sure nobody steals. Like, tons of demographics, languages are coming in and out, right? That takes patience, humility, and it takes somebody who's committed to God to do that. So the question is, how did Joseph get here, and what did he have to go through to become a leader? Okay? And I have another question for you.
Okay.
Then. What makes a ruler in God's eyes?
I think I would say that I would reiterate the things I said before.
Okay, you would reiterate the things that you said
before.
before.
Because Jesus says, the people that I appoint over you, the way that I'm a ruler over you is not as your Lord's lord over you, but it's as somebody who is willing to be a servant, to be humble and to serve you as they are leading. I think that there has to be a sense of recognition that you cannot do this job. Like, you can't do this job. You simply cannot be a leader at all, and you need God's strength and grace constantly to do this.
Yeah. And there's something interesting in 2 Chronicles chapter 19. 2 Chronicles chapter 19, verses 5 through 7. It talks about what makes a qualified leader in God's eyes. Okay? So I'm going to read it straight through, and then we'll stop and highlight all of those different qualities. Okay? 2 Chronicles chapter 19, verse 5 through 7. Backstory. So Jehoshaphat needed to assign judges to his kingdom so the nation wouldn't turn from the Lord. Because, like, if you read in Chronicles, you have this king did evil in the sight of the Lord and led people astray, right?
It's a mess.
It was basically, the Chronicles show what happens when you have an unconsecrated leader. When you have basically a boss almost, right? And not a leader. Verse 5, it says, and he, Jehoshaphat, set judges in the land throughout all the fenced cities of Judah, city by city. And he said to the judges, take heed what ye do, for ye judge not for man, but for the Lord, who is with you in the judgment. Wherefore now let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Take heed and do it, for there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, nor respect of persons, nor taking of gifts. Okay? So this is what I'm understanding here, right? To be qualified as a leader in God's eyes, according to 2 Chronicles chapter 19, verses 5 through 7, you have to realize that you are judging for God and not for man. Second, you can't have iniquity. Third, you can't be a respecter of persons. So that means if your friend, you want to help your friend more than somebody else,
You can't do that.
You can't do that.
Yep.
And then fourth, you cannot take bribes.
I think I really wish that like the leadership conversations that we have in the church and in the world beyond go beyond just like being empowered, being strong. Like you got to show that you're in charge. Like this whole passage I think is a call to humility. You're not leading. God's leading. And you're leading in behalf of him. And so you have to be right with him to do that very well. And I'm assuming you're paralleling these things with Joseph and like his journey.
So what I'm doing is I'm paralleling it with Joseph, yes. But first, I wanted to highlight what God requires. And then see, when Joseph was a young child, if he had those character traits or not. But before I go there, I just want to show how crazy this is, right? Let's bring this up again, right? Rihanna is the president of the United States, right? She wants to do it, okay? She has to realize that when she makes a decision, she's judging for God and not for the people of the United States only, right? And then this one's really hard. Like you can't have iniquity in your heart. That means every single day you've got to cleanse your heart, right? If there's an issue happening in the United States, you've got to take some time to cleanse your heart, right? And then respect of person and taking bribes is something that it seems like we see. I'm not a politician, but looking from the outside, it seems like what we see in the political world. Yeah, so many people take bribes. So many people bring their friends in. All of those different realms. So like you following 4 of these qualities, you would stand out. And Joseph stood out from the beginning of his leadership. But let's talk about Joseph, who he was. So before Joseph was a leader, God had to take him through certain steps, okay? And let's talk about what Joseph was. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question. If you had to describe Joseph as a 17-year-old boy, what would you call him?
So this is before he goes into slavery.
Oh yeah, 17-year-old kid with his dad.
I'm going to say Joseph is coddled.
Okay.
Joseph is sheltered.
Okay.
He's a little entitled.
Okay. You can say it straight out.
He's a little spoiled.
Okay, you're getting there. You can say it.
Joseph is intelligent. Joseph is very bright, very quick, very sharp. But he's also a little bit conscious of that and a little bit arrogant about that. Particularly with his brothers. He's
a brat.
I didn't say it. You said it.
I was trying to get you to say it. You were skirting around it. But and okay, here, this is why I'm saying it. Genesis chapter 37. Now, okay, the Bible doesn't say, and Joseph was a spoiled brat. It doesn't say that, right?
That's funny if it did, though.
But let's read it, okay? We're going to do Genesis chapter 37. We're going to read verse 3. Then we're going to jump over to verse 12 through 14.
Okay.
Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children.
Crazy, because he literally had like 11 other sons.
Yeah. So this guy's got 11 sons.
He just arrives. Joseph just popped up on him and he's like, this one's my favorite.
Yeah.
This one's my favorite.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Okay. So here's the deal, right? You and I are siblings, right? And we're in our 30s. We're living our career, right? And we're the older siblings, right? So we had to raise our younger siblings. We had to do whatever if we wanted a bicycle.
You had to go out and work to get that bicycle.
You sell lemonade.
Yep.
Right?
You figure it out.
Exactly. And then, you know, let's just say I wanted a coat. And I saw this coat in the store. And my dad's like, figure out how to make the money.
Mm-hmm.
Go sell some sheep.
You're
and
like,
then, sons later, your dad's old, right? Like, sons later. Your dad's
by
old.
Like 4 women.
Yeah. Your dad's old. And this cute little kid comes out. And he's 17, or he's in his teens. And you can tell that he's like, oh yeah, he's my favorite son. And
that's the thing.
It's
it
like,
wasn't even like he kept it secret. Like he was obvious about it.
He's like, no, he's my favorite son.
He's my favorite son. What you lot have been slaving and working hard to honor and respect the family, build it up. This guy just got here, and I love him more than you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you're 30, you got a big high flying career as a doctor. I'm a lawyer. This kid is like crawling. He's like, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's the one.
And then when he gets older, right? Joseph doesn't even see a coat in the store. I'm like, what's dad doing in the sewing room?
Dad's been going to like sewing classes every evening for
exactly.
like weeks.
And then he comes out like you come home for like a family dinner and Joseph has his coat. You're like, dude, congratulations on your coat. What'd you do to get it? He's like, oh, dad made it for me. All right, okay.
I'd be sick.
we talk about the brothers not having like a Christ-like character and being jealous, but like
it'd be tough.
It's gonna be tough, right?
Mm.
If that younger brother is still nice to me and stuff like that, it's just gonna be something within our 11 siblings. Is like, he's a favorite. Dad's just old, right? But okay,
right.
Genesis 37 verses 12 through 14. Okay, before we go there, in the other verses, if you look at verses 4 through 11, Joseph is now having dreams that the brothers and the mom and dad are going to bow down and worship. So let's go back to our story, right? That little kid with the coat of many colors you didn't have to work for, during your family meeting, your family dinner, he's like, oh, I had a dream that like all you guys, mom and dad, bowed down to me like in a couple years. So now you're not only, it's not only hard to be upset with just like dad for having a favorite. Now I don't really like you because now you're saying that you're a favorite, you're smart, and you know it. And
you're going to like claim what isn't yours. Like to do that, you're going to usurp us.
Exactly.
I do think that Joseph lacked a bit of EQ here because Joseph, like, we know that you're a favorite. Look, every family has their favorites. Like, we know whose favorite grandkid or like child, like we know.
That's impossible. No.
We know.
But our parents say, I don't have a favorite.
I'm my mom's favorite. I'm joking.
Okay.
I'm joking. But I do think there is something about like, it's, when we know it's common knowledge, like you're saying, it's common knowledge, we know that they're the favorite, but we are all conscious that we are all loved very much. There's a difference in how you receive that. But not only is this kid being favored, he's also now vocalizing, yeah, I think I'm better than you. That's what we're hearing. You think you're better than us. And we've been trying our best to prove to our father all these years that we are worthy, that we are respectable, that we can carry on his name, that we can continue his legacy. That's a huge task, right? That was the purpose of having kids in this time, was like carrying on the name, like bringing greatness to your family. And this little pipsqueak, who's by like the second wife, which is a whole other thing in itself, that whole story, right? He's now coming up talking about you can bow down to me. Huh? Like, actually, who do you think you are?
So I can see that's great points you lead out there. Now, I want to stop again before we move on. His character doesn't show that he can be a leader at this point yet. Because one other thing that I can see as being a leader, if you're judging for God and not for man, as a leader, there are going to be some things that God might show you that you realize it's going to be detrimental if I say this to the team.
Ooh.
Right? So we're going to continue with the story of Joseph, but remember, like, we might do these different cool side points, but we're going on a journey to see the things that Joseph had to go through to become a leader. And why I want to bring this up is, whether you're old or young, there is a purpose in our lives, and we might question, why is this hard thing happening to me? And I want to challenge that this challenging circumstance, whatever it is, might be happening to you so God can grow you to be a leader, or God can grow you to be in that team, or God can grow you to fulfill that purpose because you're not ready yet.
Oof.
So let's go back to our friend Joseph the Brat. Okay?
That's crazy.
He's got the coat of many colors. He tells he's the favorite. He tells about the dream. Now they're angry with him. And Israel does what? In verse 12, Genesis 37, verse 12. And his brethren, meaning Joseph, went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. So, by the way, Joseph's brothers are still working for his dad. Okay? In verse 13 now. And Israel said to Joseph, do not thy brethren feed in the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them.
Oh, so this is my question, so I'm going to pause you there. This is my question. Why isn't Joseph in the fields too?
Because he's
in the fields. Why is Joseph not in the fields?
I have the answer. Israel, he took so much work into making that coat of many colors, and if he's in the field, he's going to mess it up.
Oh, my days. Days.
But, okay. So, and Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here am I. So I wanted to still highlight something. Joseph is an obedient son, right? He loves his father. He wants to do what's right. And Israel says, hey, I don't know what's happening with my sons. They're with my flock. I want to make sure they're okay. And something that if you continue to read the verses in the chapters about this story, you realize that Israel still loved his sons. Although Joseph was a favorite, Israel still loved his sons. So he's not a villain or anything like that. He's a parent, loves his sons, made some mistakes still. But Joseph is like, yes, I'll do what you asked me to do. Okay? And verse 14, and he said unto him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. So we're reading this narrative, and Joseph is like, okay, Father, I'll go check on my brothers. And in verse 14, he says, check to see if they're okay, and check to see if the flocks are okay. All right, we're siblings again, right? We're going to go back into this story. We just had that dinner with this brat, Joseph the Brat, right? We're like, okay, we're going to go feed these flocks in Shechem because we can't handle this.
Right, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here, right?
Let's split.
And we're eating, right? Feeding the flocks, having some lunch. And one of the brothers is like, what's that over the hill? It's like, man, maybe it's a rich guy coming. They're like,
that's
dude,
Joseph.
I've seen that coat. No,
He's him.
No.
Dad sent him.
Dad sent him to snitch on us.
Check up on us.
Yeah, Dad sent him to snitch on us because we read it in 14, right? Verse 14. Israel's caring for the sons. But if we're siblings, Dad sends his favorite son
to come see what's going on.
The
one who isn't even in the field with us right now.
No.
Mind you.
Yeah.
Mind you, he's at home studying Latin or something. I don't know.
He might be a theologian, right? Moving forward, we don't have time to read. What happens is Reuben they wanted to kill him. Like, they didn't have any love for this guy. They were so upset. You and I, as siblings, were so upset with this kid because we saw him how he was raised, the favoritism he had, and we just don't like him. And that means our hearts are not with Christ. This is another lesson. God may have shown you that he has a calling for you, but if you are not wise with how you share that calling with others, it may cause others not only to ignore you and not listen to you, but it might cause them to be jealous, and it might cause them to even want to kill you. So Joseph isn't a leader yet, right? He has a calling, but he's not a leader yet. Okay, so let's move on through the story. So what happens here, they want to kill him. Reuben, the oldest son, is like, let's just throw him in the pit And in his heart, he wanted to come back and save him, right? But while they have him in the pit, they're continuing to eat their lunch. It seems as though Reuben is not in this picture. In verse 28, it says, "Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt." So there's two things happening here. There's a battle between good and evil happening, right? God has a plan for Joseph, but because of Joseph's ignorance, he's going to get himself killed. And Satan uses that. But God saves him. And God realizes, if I keep my son in this spot here, he's not going to be the leader that he needs to be.
Oof. I think it's interesting that you bring that up for the fact that the psalmist makes it clear in Psalm 105 that God sent Joseph into slavery, which I think is a really strange thing. So I'm going to read from verse 16 to 19. This is kind of like the summary of what's happening with Joseph through the lens of what God is doing to Joseph or allowing to happen to Joseph. "So moreover, he called for a famine in the land. He destroyed all the provision of bread. He sent I'm sorry. I know that this is like unlocking something, right? Like,
for this is not a video, but like while she's reading, I'm scanning ahead, and like your mind's gonna be blown.
This is incredible. This is incredible.
Go ahead.
Okay. "Moreover, he called for a famine in the land. He destroyed all the provision of bread. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons, until the time that his word came to pass." His word in that passage is referring to Joseph's word. So about the dream of his brothers and his parents. "The word of the Lord tested him."
Okay. This is crazy. So I'm gonna say, okay, so verse 16, the Lord caused a famine. And so to prepare for this famine, he sent Joseph in verse 17. He caused him, verse 17 and 18, he caused him to be captured until the time came to fruition, and the Lord tried him until he was ready. In verse 19. That's the part that's mind-blowing. So and this is a cool thing, right? So Psalms, you might read Psalms and it's almost like Psalms is a theologian, right? It just brings up little topics here and there, but it's using a story that we can go back to. So it's saying here, Joseph the brat wasn't ready. And Joseph the brat, if he stayed with his dad, would never have been ready. Joseph the brat would not have been able to save the region. Pretty crazy, right? Let's hit some points as we're thinking about Joseph, right? Joseph did love his brothers as well. And it's interesting, Joseph seems to be a complex character because although he's spoiled, he's made mistakes, he loves his brothers and he means well.
I just want to add that, like, it's really important we don't flatten characters and come to reductive readings of like, oh, this guy was a bad guy or this guy was a good guy. Like, we're human beings. Yeah. And at the end of the day, every human being in this book, in the Word of God, is just like us. Same passions, same, propensities, same inclinations. Joseph wasn't the best of kids because of his upbringing, but that doesn't mean that he's the villain of the story.
No. So it's a sandy evening, and Joseph that same morning set out with a whistle in his voice to do the bidding of his father, who he loves, to go visit his bros that he loves. The same evening, his coat's ripped, he's shackled in irons, tears streaming down his face, the wind blowing and the sand stinging his cheeks, and his soft cheeks, by the way. He doesn't seem like he's done any work. So his hands might be scratched already because sand hitting it. He's never experienced the weather out there, right? His skin's burning, probably starting to peel already because he's never been in the sun. And he realizes, I'm never going to see my dad again. I'm on my own now. And here's a point in the story. Sometimes you may have to go somewhere so that you can experience trials, so that you can be ready. But on your way, whether you go out of your free will and you listen to God or not, or if God sends you because he knows he has to send you that way. Because imagine this. If you're living a great life, like, why am I going to go to Egypt?
Right, there's nothing there for me.
There's nothing there for me.
But God needed him there.
God needed him there. And God needed to prepare him there. But then, this is where the leader starts to be made. We have proof in the stories that happen that Joseph had to make a decision at that point. Am I going to harbor this anger from my brothers? Am I going to be angry at God? Because why did God do this to me? My own brothers betrayed me. We're Christians. In the Christian environment, we have people who mean well, people who are on different journeys, and people who might tell us certain things, and they feel that God told them to tell us this, and it might hurt. There might be people who have betrayed you in a way that you could never imagine forgiving them. But you have to make that decision that the God that you've been taught, maybe even the God that the person told you about that betrayed you, that person who betrayed you, even if they taught you about God, that God who they told you about needs to be your God. It's not the God of the church. It's not the Jesus of your religion. It's not the Jesus of doctrine. It is your Jesus, your God, and you have to follow him. That's the point that's laid out here that I can see, because as we're going to go see two other stories before we finish here, but Joseph had to make that decision before he entered Egypt, because he's going into an area where nobody knows who God is. And he's going to stand up for something that is completely uncommon. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the story of Joseph is one that's told so often that we're like, yep, he got sold into slavery, he went to prison, and then he went to prison again, and then he came out, and it's blessed. I don't think that I've ever seen it as an intentional training ground for him being who he became. I think I've known it in my mind of God, sent him there, and the passage that we referenced. But the same way that God sent Moses to the wilderness to be a shepherd, and that was his seminary. Egypt was Joseph's seminary. He was forced. He was forced by his circumstances. But even when we are forced into positions that we don't want to be in, we still have a choice to make about how we're going to respond to that situation. And so, the devil, as we know in the end of the book, Joseph said that this was meant for evil, but God meant this for good. And I think this is the point. Romans 8:28 says that God works all things together for the good of those that love him and are called according to his purpose, right? And so we see in his life this really practical laying out of I think we like to think that God works the good together for good, because we're he works out when things aren't going great, but it's no, he sent Joseph to Egypt because he had a plan for his life, and he knew that without Egypt, Joseph would never be the Joseph that he needed to be. And I think it's so easy in our situations, in our lives, to say, oh my goodness, this is so hard. Why do I have to go through this? And there's nothing wrong with crying out to God and saying, this sucks, I'm in pain. Everything that's really important to do, not pretending this is fine. No, you are in pain.
Yeah.
You are in pain. Tell God you are in pain.
Joseph was torn.
He was in pain. You're stripped from your family, all your father that you love, your brothers that you thought cared for you, the ones that sold you. There's so many layers that you have to process as they're coming. The betrayal is bam, 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 bam. But you have to make the choice. I trust that my God, which is what you're saying, my God can work even this for good. Even this, my God can work for my good. And I don't know how Joseph's thinking through that process of I'm a slave now, what's going to happen to my uncallous, gentle hands and all these things. But I do know that at some point he had to embrace that truth. My God can work even this for my good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And chapter 39 of Genesis, in verse 1, it shows that Joseph was sold to Potiphar. Verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So right after Joseph was sold, it shows that the Lord was with him. And something we have to remember, God is not with us unless we allow him to be with us. So that's where I'm coming from. We're saying Joseph made the decision to make God his God. And the Lord blessed him so much, right? He was the ruler of this house. And you can read on, and in the rest of these verses, it says that Potiphar didn't even know how much riches he had. He was like, I'm giving everything to this guy because whatever he touches, God blesses him, and it's just going to prosper. But the thing is, Joseph still wasn't ready. But he was ready enough to be tested, okay? We don't have to read it, but I'll explain it, right? Potiphar has this wife that has some issues, right? She sees this young man who is making her rich, making her husband rich, and, she's probably not working because she doesn't have to. I don't know if she has children. I wonder if she has children. It's an interesting
That's
thought.
true.
It doesn't mention that she has children, right? Yeah. But Joseph, she might be, maybe she's cooking. She sees Joseph and she's like, man, he's handsome. Potiphar might have a little belly, but Joseph is a young, nice guy. So she makes a push at him. And number one, if Joseph fell for that, that would be wrong. And if he fell for that, he would be betraying his boss.
And betraying
But
God.
what mattered to Joseph?
That he was betraying God.
That he was betraying God.
Yeah.
So.
Because he could have done it and gone away with it, and no one would have known. This is the thing I think we sometimes forget. It wasn't like he was going to do it and then he would have been, caught. It was very plausible that he could have done this and gone away with it. But he says in verse 9, chapter 39, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
Exactly. I know I explained it, but I'm just going to read these 3 verses so you can get the idea of the test that Joseph went through. After he made the decision to follow God, God made him prosperous. Things were going well. Remember, when things are going well, even when things are going well, we need to have our guard up. In verse 7, it says, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Fascinating here. He says, okay, Potiphar has made me master of everything. He's given me every single thing except you because you're his wife. You would think he says, how can I do that to Potiphar? He's like, how can I do this to God? He realizes here, God is the one who makes him prosperous. And I want to, this is another point here. Sometimes when you stand up for the right, God's still going to let you to go through trials. So that doesn't mean you should back away from the right. That means God's saying, you are ready to go in the fire and be tested, and when you pass this test, I'm going to give you another one right there. Because what happened next?
She comes after him incessantly, to the point where she propositions him and grabs him and tries to effectively force him. And it says that he flees. He leaves his garment and flees naked. And then she tells the lie that he tried to assault her, and Potiphar, to save face, has to put him in prison.
She blackmailed the guy because he didn't do what she wanted. And we have to remember that when God allows us to be tested, he's going to give us only what we can handle. So when you're going through it, remember that God's given you the strength to handle it. This lady, she probably looked nice too, but she tried multiple times, and the last time she's like, I'm not getting this guy unless I try to hold him. And it's in James, it talks about resist the devil and he will flee from you. Joseph ran. And this is something interesting. When she threw a fit. Potiphar knew Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Potiphar knew his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking this. If Joseph did commit this sin, Potiphar's wife wouldn't have told Potiphar.
Mm-hmm.
Potiphar's a smart guy because he's a business guy.
Mm-hmm.
He probably saw her casting looks to Joseph. And when she came to him, as a smart guy that Potiphar would have had to have been, he knew that Joseph didn't do it.
Mm-mm.
One, because he knew his wife, and two, because he knew Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
But Joseph still went to prison because God still saw it fit for him to be tested. Because for some rhyme or reason here, Joseph still wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Joseph wasn't Joseph the brat. Maybe he was Joseph half the brat.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And he still needed to be tested.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened here? Next, we won't read it, but Joseph was in prison. He had favor. Joseph was in prison. He had favor with the guard. He got a leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so clear that God is trying to build this leader here. Mm. Remember, even if you are demoted, God has placed you in that position, and we can still do our best, still show what a Christian character should be, and in that low position, he will exalt us because he became master of the prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the end of 23 in chapter 39 reads, the keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper.
Whew.
Even in prison.
Even in prison.
God is prospering Joseph.
So when a family member has betrayed you and you choose God, he's going to be with you. When a coworker or anybody in your job has betrayed you, he's going to be with you. But he's only going to be with you if you continue to choose him. And we're going to touch this here again. So after his time in prison, he wasn't just in prison for a little while, right? He was in prison. It doesn't say how long he was in prison, but he was in prison. The butler and the baker came. They had a dream. He told them about their dream. And he told the butler, remember me when you go back to Pharaoh. But in chapter 40, verse 23, it says, when the butler was reinstated, after he got Pharaoh angry, he was reinstated. It said in verse 23, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. And in verse 41, it says, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed. So that means that we don't know how long he was with Potiphar. But after he helped the butler and the baker answer their dream, he had to wait 2 years. And he was still faithful. Pharaoh has a dream. The butler remembers Joseph. And now, as we read in Psalms chapter 105, God's purpose for Joseph, he's ready. He now has the character of a leader. The character of that leader who is no respecter of persons, who doesn't judge for man but judges for God, who doesn't take bribes, and does not have iniquity in his heart.
I think it's so important. And as you're talking, and like my brain is like firing. God sent Joseph into slavery and into prison. 2 things that are like such abominable violations of human rights. Even today, like the prison incarceration system and like slavery, human trafficking are horrific things. And it wasn't quite like that back then.
No.
But the essence is the same, right? And I think it's fascinating that to teach Joseph how to be a ruler over the greatest nation of that time in earth, he puts Joseph in 2 of the worst positions so that he will have to learn compassion, humility, servitude. He knows what it feels like to be a slave. So when he's making rules about slavery, he's thinking about what he has gone through. When he's making decisions about who's going to prison, he's thinking about how prison was for him. So he's not making these decisions arbitrarily, as a lot of our rulers and leaders do often, right? They're like, oh, that's not a big deal. Joseph has been a victim of human trafficking. He's been a victim of the incarceration system. There is no way that he will sit on any board or pass any bill that's going to make their lives more difficult, because he's been there. And I think that, like, we lack that in a lot of leadership too. And I wasn't thinking of this before, but it's coming up in this conversation now. The need for compassion for our fellow humans as leaders. If I don't know what it's like to be a janitor, but I'm a CEO, I would treat them disrespectfully, with no dignity and with no honor and respect. But if my mother was a janitor or was a cleaner growing up, and I respected her because of her grind, even when I'm the CEO, I'm talking to my janitor, I know his name. I know her family's names. You know, I'm giving her gifts at the Christmas party because she's part of this business too. And I think that sense of greatness you can only be at that dizzying point of greatness if you've been at this sickening point of lowness.
He that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Because our hearts are so sinful, God has to show us the bottom before he can bring us up. Job was perfect. And God took everything from him because he still needed to grow. So in our generation, you and I are similar in age, Rianna, and maybe our listeners might be similar in age or might be younger or older. But as guards are changing in our generations, the older people are dying and people our age are stepping up, God's going to test us. And there comes a point in all of our lives when we have to make a decision for ourselves, whether we're going to follow the Lord or not, because it's a choice. You're never going to be forced to follow God or not. And that means if you're struggling with doubt, rejection, depression, hate, anger, God is there. You can shout at him, you can scream at him, you can tell him your heart. But in that process, we have to choose him. And how do we choose him? How is he going to get us through that? 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. It is, unfortunately, it's cliche, but it should not be. The Bible that's filled with novelas, if you read them, you'll see yourself in it. We can see ourselves. There are people in church who have been abused, who have been judged, who have been raped, who have been sold, and they've left God because of that. And I want to make a strong call, if you're listening to this, that if you have been through any of those things, you can still lean on God because he was killed. And you can use those terrible experiences. Remember, we're not just bringing up a theology. We're using this because of a story that we just saw. God can use those terrible experiences to make you a leader so that Jesus can come soon. So somebody could be looking on all of the situation and asking, like, I'm doubting God. I try to read as much as I can. I need to do more reading, but there's a book called Steps to Christ. It's a book with 13 chapters, and in chapter 12, the chapter is called What to Do with Doubt. The author is Ellen White, and it's one of my favorite books because it's a book that's not a theologian. I've got to use her podcast name. I like it. But it talks about doubt. And the book says, in regards to doubt, God never asks us to believe without giving sufficient evidence upon which to base our faith. His existence, his character, the truthfulness of his word are established by testimony that appeals to our reason. And this testimony is abundant. So God has given you everything in your life, in your experiences, and in the Bible, and in the stories of the Bible, where you can base your faith. That's why 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 says, Scripture is given by inspiration of God. I remember when I read this small paragraph helped me. When you read this with an open heart, that sentence there can help you solidify your relationship with God. But it doesn't stop there. The last half of this paragraph says, yet God has never removed the possibility of doubt. Our faith, okay, you have to catch this here. Your faith, the faith of Abraham, the faith of Moses, the faith of Abel, our faith has to rest on evidence not demonstration. So God can show us something. It's like, oh, I can look back and see that God's been with me. That's evidence. I can't say, oh, Lord, you have to show me in order for me to believe. Because he's not going to ask you to believe if he hasn't shown you and demonstrated it to you. But God is so loving that he's not going to force us, because it says those who wish to doubt will have opportunity, while those who really desire to know the truth will find plenty of evidence on which to rest their faith. So, us as young people, we're thinkers. We love to think. We love to talk. We want to understand. We really want to know truth. So when you're asking God those questions, when I'm asking God the questions, I have to ask him. He wants me to reason. Am I trying to prove him wrong? Or am I trying to know his will? So God gives us his word. He reminds us how he's led us in the past. He gives us his Holy Spirit. And he gives us a foundation to rest our faith. If you ever have the chance, I want to close off with a couple thoughts on faith. If you look at Joseph made that one decision, but he had to continually make the decision over and over and over again to follow Christ. Because God was with him when he was sold to Potiphar. God was with him when he ran away from Potiphar's wife. God was with him when he was in prison, because he had to daily make that decision. If you look at Solomon, God was with Solomon, but Solomon forgot God, and he had the consequences for that. So when you have that experience, the encounter that brings you to the foot of the Savior, whether it's a scripture or something that you can remember that God has done for you, that's something that you need to remind yourself to keep yourself at the foot of the cross. There's a book called Living by Faith. I recommend it, by E.J. Wagner and A.T. Jones. Use a scripture to define faith and how we can live by it. It says, although your mind has expanded and your spiritual sight has been greatly strengthened, the word still has meaning, because every word of God is of infinite depth. That's because all scripture is given by inspiration of God, right? So, as your mind expands, the word means more to you than it did in the beginning. That's why we have to keep with the Bible.
Yeah. That's why you have to keep reading these stories.
That's why you have to keep reading it. And there's a poem where a captain told a young sailor to steer the ship to a star. The captain went to bed. He woke up and realized that the ship is in the wrong direction. And the young learning captain is like, yeah, I need another star to steer to. He says, you don't have to steer to another star. You've steered away from that star. In the same way, if we forget the foundation that brought us to Christ, that means we've turned around. It says, so it is, this is the book, Living by Faith, so it is with those who say that they have outgrown certain portions of the Bible. The trouble is that they have turned their backs on it. And what that means is, and it's just like the gospel, if we forget that Jesus died for us, what's the point? The other thing that Joseph had to realize is that he wasn't perfect, because his father didn't help him realize that, because he was his favorite. And so there's another interesting sentence that Living by Faith, I just love this commentary. It's great. It says, the moment you cease to believe, then you are a sinner, just the same as if you had never believed. Bear with me here. That's a radical statement. Meaning, if I believed yesterday and I don't believe today, it's like I've never believed. Yesterday's faith will not answer for today any more than your breathing yesterday will keep you alive today.
I see.
Think about that. Like, it's a radical statement, but when you put it into practice, when you take the theology out of it, it's saying if you exercise faith as often and as long as you breathe, you will be righteous as long as you live. So basically, if Joseph was like, I made that decision when I was being sold, I don't need to make the decision today. He's holding his breath. He's choking out his faith. If you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I don't want to breathe anymore because I breathed yesterday. I have all the oxygen I need. No, we need to breathe every moment. So this is the last thing I want to say. When you go through the worst thing in your life, God wants you to choose him. He's asking you to choose him, but he can't force you. When you choose him every day. That encounter that he showed you of his power and his goodness, that's your foundation. And that's the Bible. It's not theology. It's a story where God changed Joseph the brat into the leader.
I'm Rianna.
And I'm Belgrove.
And we are not theologians.